Everyone, it's your boy here, Mr. Jennings, back at it yet again for another satellite edition of Big Orange Biology, back at like we would be in the classroom. We're continuing on with the ecology stuff in this video here. We're actually going to be doing this in probably no more than 3 more videos at most. This one might be the second at last. Who knows? We'll see. Alright, so big part of this video here today is going to be talking about ecological interactions. And if we have time when we get through that, we may go ahead and talk about measuring ecology. But overall, our main focus here is talking about the ecological interactions. So knowing these concepts is critical because while they may not necessarily be on the exam, knowing how organisms interact can be very beneficial to, well, one, it's really nice to know these things. I think it's very much a generally interesting concept. Also, hear me out, just good to know. And like always, we're going to wait here on further guidance. Hopefully by the end of this week. I'm still shooting these here on Sunday night. It's getting kind of late. This is the third video I've shot of this session. But our goal here is to get through the rest of the ecology unit this week. Just kind of go pretty quickly. There's going to be quite a bit of video. But we're waiting on guidance, essentially. Waiting on guidance from College Board exactly what the exam's going to look like. And like I said in the last video, as soon as I find out, I will make a video detailing it for you all, the students. So keep an eye out for that when it comes around. Let me fix that from autofocus. Okay, so let's get to it. So today we are talking about community interactions. These are interactions within the individuals of a community. Now, community is defined as the biotic and abiotic factors of multiple species living in an area. Well, mostly, but how they interact with abiotic as well. So, these are population level events. Basically, a population has unique properties to its level of organization. These properties emerge amongst individuals who comprise the populations with each other in the ecosystem. Basically, these interactions between populations can be analyzed at the individual level and at the population level. It's a very, very fancy way of saying we don't see these interactions except whenever they're in population. If you have these organisms in individual stasis without any other members of their species, you will not see these interactions. These interactions are only seen in population. It's basically they reach a threshold of individuals and all of a sudden the behaviors take place. Now, populations have 2 major properties. Those properties are known as distribution and abundance. Now, they have 2 major properties, and distribution and abundance is one of them. Distribution and abundance of organisms are affected by the community interactions and environmental changes. For example, natural disasters, like Mount St. Helens here, that's going to create a big disruption to population distribution, you would think. Resource availability. All of a sudden, putting new resources in an area where there's no resources or very limited resources to begin with, that's going to create a population change. May create an algal bloom later. I don't know. We'll see. Human impact. Feed the squirrels. Any of my students at East Tennessee State University in the next year or so, don't feed the squirrels. Trust me, they will mug you. Don't feed them. Don't encourage it. I think that's the way for most colleges, but the UTSU has famous ones, apparently. But human impact. By introducing human impact by basically giving animals the idea that humans are a food source in terms of we will give them food, that encourages negative behavior that causes endangerment for the human and the animal's life. Because they're no longer desensitized. They're no longer, wary of humans. They become desensitized. They see us as a meal ticket. You get squirrels shaking you down for a piece of food. Don't give the food to the squirrels. Now, populations do interact with each other. The interaction between different populations affects its distribution and abundance. We typically refer to a major factor of these systems as niche or niche. I've heard it both ways. So the niche is the total interactions of an organism within its environment. You may have learned niche as an organism's job or role. And that's partially true, but it needs to talk about how they interact. Competition and predation can limit the distribution of abundance of populations as well. Basically, predators can't live in high volumes because if there's a high volume of predators, they, 1, compete against each other for food, and 2, there may not be enough prey animals. Also, prey animals populations are kept in check by predators. Now back to the niche here. So there's a concept in biology called the competitive exclusion principle. Basically, when two organisms have the same overlapping requirements in the same ecosystem, one species is going to be more competitive and will outcompete the other for those resources. So we have two examples here of paramecium. We have Paramecium aurelea and Paramecium caudatum. Individually, it's not exactly 100% the same growth, but it's pretty similar. You can see there's a similarity. But when you put them together in the same medium, all bets are off. That Paramecium caudatum cannot keep up with Aurelia. Like in this ecosystem, it is completely gone. It's extinct. It is. By 15 days, over 15 days, that whole family got destroyed because Aurelia just outdid it. And not only did Aurelia outdid it pretty well. Now, it didn't follow the exact same growth curve. It didn't hover near 300. It stayed below 250 because, got to keep them honest. But it looked pretty darn similar. It didn't even get phased. Like right here, by day 2, it knew it won. It went exponential. This one went flat and eventually crashed. This one exponential had a couple of dips, probably from over competition with itself, and it's pretty good shape. Now, niches and organisms' roles can be expanded or limited by symbiotic relationships called symbiosis. Now, mutualisms are probably one of the more prevalent ones you're going to find on the planet, where basically both organisms benefit. A classic example here of the screen is the hummingbird. Many flowers are co-evolved to correspond with a hummingbird beak. The hummingbird has a guaranteed food source in the nectar of this flower, and this flower has a guaranteed pollinator in this hummingbird. So they highly adapted and co-evolved together to fit together. That's the problem if one of them goes extinct. If all of a sudden the hummingbird stops coming around, this flower does not have an effective pollinator. Now the flower will not go extinct more likely, it will just be less widespread. Conversely, if that hummingbird lost its primary food source, it probably could get food from another flower, just won't be not as great, and it won't be as competitive, because all of a sudden now it's going to be overlapping with somebody else's niche. This here has basically guaranteed these two organisms have carved out their own niche, and they don't have to worry about competing with another individual. So they have purposely withdrew themselves from the competition by making their own side system. And by the way, we see that with all mutualisms. Communalism. These are a little harder to find because there seems to be some benefit usually. But communalism basically works like this. One benefits, the other gets nothing. Communalism, like this case, this parrot here, the parrot lives in the tree. The tree doesn't get harmed because there's a parrot, because there's a hole already there to begin with. And the parrot gets shelter. That's usually the examples you're going to find in communalism. Though I've known many scientists argue that communalism doesn't truly exist because some animals get benefits. Some trees will still get benefits from having a parrot living in them. Certain prey animals won't. Certain parasites and stuff won't bother the tree. I don't know. But we're going to talk about communalism like it does exist. Parasitism. This one's probably, if mutualism is the most common, if it's not the most common, it's probably parasitism. There's a ton of parasites. This, by the way, is a flea. I don't believe it's a human louse or human flea, so it ain't that, but it's a flea, so we're going to say a pet or dog. Parasitism is probably the most famous that most people know because it's the one that's got the sensationalism to it. Basically, one benefits the parasite, and the other is harmed the host. Typically, though, parasites don't like to kill their host because, you'd like kill your meal ticket. Parasites are also highly co-evolved. It's like mutualism, except it's not a willfully co-evolution. It's antagonistic. It's not beautiful, not mutualistic. This is antagonistic. Basically, the host does not want to be a host for very much. So it's going to adapt various structures and adaptations to get rid of the parasite. A parasite will co-evolve around those mutations. Basically, the genetic diversity of the parasite is allowed to adapt and evolve around any adaptations the host may develop. So it's like an antagonistic evolutionary arms race. Basically, one zigs, the other zags, and basically tries to beat them around the corner. Parasites are very much a major concern. They are a population density dependent factor, and we are very concerned about how parasites function. So we like to keep them in check because they are a major drain on our healthcare systems, and they're major drains on the ecological systems and economics when we talk about livestock and such. Now, we can model community interactions by, looking at the different effects. So interactions amongst populations can be modeled and those models can be used to inform predictions. So there's two concepts, the top-down and the bottom-up. Bottom-up is the concept that limitations on the higher trophic levels are a result of basically the energy availability in the lower levels. Each trophic level only gets 10% of the level before it, and the reason why there's so few apex predators, there's not enough energy to go around. Kind of. But top-down argues that the lower trophic levels would exceed their demand, and it would exceed the supply and over demand on the producers, causing producer extinction or dramatic reduced producer level. And they argue that a top-down approach keeps that effect at bay. Essentially, a predator, the apex predator, now its number is limited by its prey, but the introduction of an apex predator causes the prey, or usually it's the primary consumer, levels to lower. Populations level get lower. As populations levels get lower, there's less plants being consumed. Ecosystems a little bit more balanced. And this is what's considered a trophic cascade in the green world hypothesis. So this is the traditional trophic cascade and green world. Basically, by having an apex predator, they keep the deer population in check, which keeps a healthy forest. By removing the apex predator, deer populations explode exponentially because their only major limiting factor, besides food, was predators. And now the prey are going to eat away on the trees, and unfortunately, they're going to lead to starvation because there's, again, the other limiting factor is food availability. And it's also food will be less available. And in the process, a very unhealthy ecosystem has formed. And I guess that you can't do only one thing, and we've already watched this video before. And we'll see. And we got time here. So let's talk about how you know if an ecosystem is okay. So I mentioned that the ecosystems can be very weak, and that the loss of an apex predator can cause an ecosystem to be very bad shape. So what they do to determine if a ecosystem is good or not is they look at two factors. They'll either look at species richness, which is the number of different species in a community, or species diversity, which is the number and distribution of a species in a community. So not only is it how diverse, the number of different species is how they're distributed. And the way they do this is rather uninteresting, I guess. Usually they'll take these square meter grids and they'll lay them down on the ground, and they'll count all the individuals they see in these squares. It's pretty interesting. And you can look here on the, so if you take a species relationship on a rhythmic scale, a log scale, and you can look at the river, number collected over time, you can see the differences. Now, quantifying populations is kind of challenging, but there's three ways to look at it. Population growth patterns can be modeled according to several different representations. There's the exponential model, the logistic model, and the demographic model. Now, bear with me, you're going to see yet another exponential graph in the month of March. I know we've seen very many exponential graphs right now, but let's talk about it. So population growth is modeled and actual. Population growth can be modeled and actual. The type of data depends on the resource availability and the impact of limiting factors. Every population that goes through an exponential growth phase just eventually will reach a carrying capacity, and that carrying capacity is limiting factors, as we mentioned in the previous videos. And that's what's going to keep the species at bay. Oh, sorry. Pattern of survivorship and distribution. For instance, excuse me. Humans are what we call type 1, birds are type 2, and plants are type 3. And basically, it goes like this: the number of individuals surviving in log scale. As a life expectancy, this is percentage of maximum life expectancy. The majority of people tend to survive majority of their maximum life expectancy. Most people typically die in their 70s and 80s outside of, non-natural causes or disease, like a dramatic disease. Birds, meanwhile, they steadily decline. Their number of individuals surviving on a log scale tends to decrease the older they get. So they don't actually live very often to their 100% of their maximum life expectancy, and they tend not to stay towards it. They tend to die pretty quick. Trees, on the other hand, have a dramatic drop, but then they kind of stabilize, and they can live quite a while once they get past that initial infancy. We can also look at distribution. Some animals are uniform in distribution. They spread out equally. Some are random because of pollination, and some are clumped. And each of these provide evolutionary adaptations and benefits. Uniform, you got a nice evenly spread. You don't have to worry about competition for individual resources. Random, it's spread out, but it means you have good clusters. You can have uniform distribution at the same time. It also allows for increased genetic diversity because there's randomness how the things are distributed. And then there's clump, which usually is like herd animals, and that's like strength in numbers. I can also look at demographics. Now, demographics are definitely not on the AP exam. They wouldn't have been this year, but essentially, it's the age analysis of people. For instance, this here is a map of China from 2009. Majority of the population of China in this period was roughly in the age, most of them were in that mid-age, about 40s, 30s, and 40s. A good majority of the population was there, and very few members of the population were elderly. Egypt's version, same majority of the population was young, and very few of the population was old. Typically, that's what you see in an exploding population. Majority of the people are going to be very young because there's more kids being born, and their kids are having kids. And the elderly are typically dying. They die off slowly, but typically they're just going to be a smaller number. So populations tend to follow human dynamics. There's a stage 1 where it's expanding. Again, the base is larger than the top. Stage 2, the expansion is still happening, but it's starting to stabilize where the middle ages are starting to fill in. Stage 3, the top level is now larger than it ever has been. The middle is still pretty good size. It's kind of rounding out, and the base is rounding out. So it's starting to get a little bit more uniform. And by stage 4, like you see in like Japan, where there's less people being born, they're dying, and that's creating a contraction. That typically will also happen when a population reaches a certain age. Typically, there's just less kids being changing economic status usually. You can see this on the global Earth median age, number of children on the planet. You can see here parts of Africa. You're seeing about 5 to 6 kids, 4 to 5, 6 to 7. If you get to the Northern Africa, Mediterranean area, they tend to drift to 2 to 3. South Africa, 2 to 3. Good parts of the Middle East, South Asia, Mongolia, you're going to get 2 to 3. France, for some reason, 2 to 3. And in some parts of the world, you're going to see 0 to 1 or 1 to 2. Odd enough here. Little islands there. Or 5 to 3. Sorry, 3 to 4. So typically, the populations that have the most kids tend to have the lower life median age, and the populations tend to have the least amount of kids tend to have the older ages. All right, the big thing is from this video is communities interact in different ways. There's predator-prey. There's all sorts of symbiotic relationships, and it all deals with this concept of a niche. Certain organisms have a certain role they play, and those niches are a good summary of all the interactions they may have. By having and maintaining a niche, you run the risk of competition, but many organisms will have to just take themselves out of competition by forming stuff like a mutualistic relationship or even a entirely dependent predator-prey relationship where they're the only predator for a certain prey animal, and that prey animal is the only predator that they have, so they're like a designated food source. Doing so, these situations sometimes create an unnecessary issue where if the balance shifted for some reason, the population may crash. But when determines population crash is things like population abundance and distribution and how stable it is and how you can measure that. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. All right. Thank you for watching. This has been Mr. Jennings. I hope you're all staying healthy, staying at home, trying to do the best you can. I miss you all. Hope you're having a great time, though, or at least enjoying your hiatus, doing some work, kind of keep yourself sane. A very fast-moving world. But thank you all. Have a wonderful time. See you.